Have you heard of errata?
But, of course, the architect of the Tsortian Wars, the origin of our little play tonight.
How come?
Being the goddess of misunderstandings, errata's popularity is lacking. And she feels slighted by not being invited to a certain wedding. So she plans a devious vengeance, which in turn causes the Tsortian War.
And is it based on a true story?
Everything is a truth of a sort.
Is that a yes or a no?
I am not one to judge such things.
What would you say if I told you I suspected people are being murdered to summon a terrible entity to destroy the city?
I would say, doomsday is near, die all, die merrily.
That's from one of these silly plays, isn't it?
The King of Ankh, Act 4, Scene 1.
I was serious, you know. The disc might be the focal point for infernal forces that could destroy the city. I'd enjoy talking to you a lot more if you'd just stop quoting those damn plays. Do you realize how pathetic this makes you look?
What? Must I hold a candle to my shames?
You know, I think I'll be glad if this place does get destroyed by horrors from beyond time and space.
It'd be great publicity. Should I tell them how to spell my name?
I wanted to be very careful about who I spoke to about the symbol in the sanctuary. What can you tell me about this flyer?
Ah! The proud harbinger of our festivities, the page that trumpets the act that illuminates the soul.
That inhabits the body that slept on the seats that sat in the theater that shoddy carpenters made.
Do you mock me, my boy?
Oh, you're way ahead of me on that one. Well, I have to go.
Ah! Parting is such sweet sorrow.
Whatever. If I was going to turn into a wolf, I'd better do it where Privetier couldn't see me. I quickly transformed into a wolf and had a sniff around. There was an eerie, dark magenta scent in the theater. But what caught my attention was the magenta scent that seemed to disappear into the stage. My murderer had been here. Where the scent had disappeared, there were some marks. I couldn't quite make them out, but they seemed to be a definite shape of some kind. I ran my finger around the marks casually. There was something about them that made you want to trace things on them, like a smiley face or a tic-tac-toe board. Well, something like that. Maybe something a little more sinister. I traced the sign from the sanctuary on the marks, but nothing happened. I wasn't sure if I was doing it right, though.
Who would Sir like to see this time?
I'd like to use the library again.
Very well. I will show Sir the way, since it seems the labyrinthine corridors of this vast edifice are beyond Sir's meager navigational skills.
I found the obscure star-like symbol in the Necrotelecomnicon discussed for students. It called it the sign of the eel, or the Elver sign. It was apparently a protective ward against some of the older, darker gods of the Discworld. The tome also explained how to inscribe one, the order of tracing being very important. Not that I believed any of this mumbo-jumbo, but hey, you can't afford to be too careful, right? I checked that I had remembered how to draw the sign of the eel correctly, and I had. The symbol I'd found in the sanctuary was the ancient Elver sign, which apparently was a ward against the old dark gods of the Discworld. Eight plays, an eight-pointed symbol. There had to be a connection. I looked up Hwel in the library and found his complete works. In there was a discussion of the 8 great tragedies, Hwel's bloodiest works. From the About the Author paragraph, I learnt that Hwel was a dwarf who was banished from his tribe not only because of his claustrophobia, but because of his tendency to daydream. Both undesirable, to say the least, if you work in a mine. 102, and in the prime of his life for a dwarf, Hwel now worked for Vitteler's Plays at the Disc Theatre as one of the premier playwrights of the day. The 8 great tragedies were given in great detail. 8 plays, each with a collection of murders, usually with one more particularly gruesome or grotesque than the others, presumably for use in publicity trailers. The publicity trailers helped draw people into the theater by being towed around town to display posters. There was something suspiciously familiar about some of those murders. The 8 great tragedies were still in the complete works of Hwel. Well, it wasn't like they were going anywhere. Cheery collection of plays. In Titus Diplodocus, Titus was responsible for dismembering and eating various people before meeting his own grisly demise. In almost all the other plays, the lead met a horrible end. The Happy Prince of Copperhaven, who was poisoned at the end, and Antilogy and Clephatara, who were stabbed and poisoned by an asp, respectively. Kensington, who was strangled by his wife. The Leering King, who had his eyes gouged out. The Tyrant, who was stabbed repeatedly in the back, and Truculus and Cressylic. He gets dragged through the streets of Sort until dead, and she is one of the tiny handful of protagonists to actually survive one of Hwel's action-packed blockbuster murder fests. If they held a Protagonists of Hwel's Tragedies annual reunion, the only other person there would be the lead role in The King of Ankh. There did seem to be something in common with the counterweight killings and Hwel's 8 great tragedies. I'd read about the death of the title role in The Leering King, one of the 8 great tragedies. The king was hung upside down from a tree, whereupon his eyes were gouged out. It sounded very familiar. In Antilogy and Clephatara, the Queen of Jelly Baby is killed when she is bitten by an asp that would have left tiny bite marks on her. I was definitely onto something. Malachite, stabbed in the back repeatedly with a crowbar. The lead in The Tyrant, stabbed in the back repeatedly. Not with a crowbar, but it was close enough.